Dr. Eleanor Hayes watched through the facility's reinforced windows as the alien delegation retreated to their ship, moving with the frantic, jerky movements of prey animals. She pressed her fingertips against the cold glass, her heart hammering against her ribcage. What had just happened? Dr. Hayes. Director Rossman's voice crackled through the station's PA system. Report to command immediately. The research station's command center was chaos. Scientists crowded around monitors. Military personnel barked orders into satellite phones, and Rossman's face had turned an alarming shade of crimson. "What did you do to them?" he demanded, grabbing Eleanor's arm. "They've gone into emergency lockdown protocols. 3 years of diplomatic preparation ruined." "I didn't do anything," Eleanor protested. But even as the words left her mouth, she knew they weren't entirely true. There had been something. A strange pressure behind her eyes when the blue diplomat had approached, followed by a sensation like threads stretching out from her mind, latching onto something alien yet recognizable. On the monitors, the Confederation. Vessel's exterior lights flashed in complex patterns. The station's linguists scrambled to interpret. "They're saying..." A young translator looked up, face pale. "They're saying they've detected a Class 1 neural anomaly. They're invoking Quarantine Protocol Theta." "What does that mean?" Rossman demanded. "It means," a stern voice answered from the doorway, "that they believe they've encountered a mind weapon." General Pierce entered, followed by 2 stone-faced soldiers. "Hayes, we need to talk. Alone." In a makeshift interrogation room, Pierce laid out grainy printouts of brain scans. Eleanor's brain scans taken during her routine physical last month. "These unusual formations in your parietal lobe," Pierce tapped the image. "They appeared shortly after your expedition to that Nepalese monastery last year, correct?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "The monks had unusual meditation techniques. I was studying their brain activity when you experienced what you described as temporary consciousness expansion," Pierce finished. "We thought it was altitude sickness combined with sleep deprivation. Now I'm not so sure." Eleanor's mind raced back to that snow-covered mountain, the ancient chants, the strange tea the elder monk had insisted she drink before meditation. She had experienced visions, certainly, but nothing like what happened today. Outside, the alien ship's engines hummed to life. On a secure monitor, Eleanor watched as it ascended, but instead of leaving Earth's atmosphere, it moved to a higher orbit. "They're not leaving," she whispered. "No," Pierce agreed grimly. "According to our translators, they're calling for reinforcements and scanning equipment. They think you're some kind of psychic weapon we've developed." Eleanor laughed nervously. "That's absurd. I'm a neuropsychologist, not a weapon." Pierce's expression remained deadly serious. "Then explain why their security footage shows this." He turned a tablet toward her. On the screen, footage from the alien ship played. The delegation stood before Eleanor, but around her head was a subtle golden aura, tendrils of light extending toward each alien's brain. As she watched, the blue diplomat's eyes glazed over, his mouth moving mechanically as classified information poured out. Eleanor's voice failed her. The pressure behind her eyes returned, stronger now. On Pierce's tablet, hairline cracks suddenly appeared, spreading across the screen until it went dark. Pierce stepped back, hand moving to his sidearm. "What are you?" he whispered. Eleanor stared at her trembling hands. "I don't know anymore." Above them, the Confederation ship unleashed a focused scan that penetrated the station's roof, bathing Eleanor in invisible energy that awakened something buried deep in her DNA, something ancient, powerful, and no longer dormant. Eleanor woke to the sound of humming machinery. The zero-gravity chamber suspended her in a viscous blue fluid that somehow allowed her to breathe normally. Through the transparent walls, she counted 6 Vexar scientists observing her, their elongated fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "Subject consciousness restored," announced one, its voice translated through a floating orb. "Commence neural mapping sequence 37B." A thin silver probe extended toward Eleanor's temple. As it touched her skin, Excruciating pain flashed behind her eyes, but with it came something unexpected. The Vexar scientist's thoughts suddenly blazed in her mind like fire, unusual activity in the precursor pathways. This cannot be shared with the Council. Eleanor gasped, inadvertently swallowing some of the blue fluid. The scientist's private thoughts weren't just words. They contained images, emotions, and secrets. This one, Dr. Zentok, she somehow knew, was concealing findings from his superiors. Pain response abnormal, Zentok noted aloud. Increased damper field by 20%. A field of energy tightened around Eleanor's head, attempting to suppress her brain activity. Instead, it acted like a lens, focusing her emerging abilities. The other scientists' thoughts began filtering through, fragmented but intelligible. They feared her, not just her, but what she represented. Another one, like the Lurai children. It killed 60 of our best warriors before they could neutralize it. Eleanor remained still, feigning continued sedation while absorbing this revelation. These aliens had encountered human-like psychics before, and exterminated them. A new presence entered the laboratory. A military commander, his thoughts protected by cybernetic implants that gave off a grating static when Eleanor tried to read him. The Council requires progress, Zentok, the commander hissed. The dissection is scheduled for 36 hours from now. Extract what information you can before then. Dissection. The word sent adrenaline surging through Eleanor's system. The monitoring equipment beeped in alarm. Elevated stress hormones, a junior scientist reported. Administering NK-35 serum. As a needle approached her arm, Eleanor focused on the scientist controlling it. With desperate intensity, she imagined reaching into his mind, redirecting his movements. To her astonishment, his hand trembled. Then, changed course, injecting the serum into a waste receptacle instead. I made a mistake, the scientist thought to himself, completely unaware of her influence. Better not mention it. Eleanor nearly cried out in triumph but maintained her docile facade. For the next 6 hours, she experimented cautiously, making small suggestions in the scientist's minds. Adjust a reading here, overlook an anomaly there. With each success, her confidence grew. When night cycle began and only Zentok remained monitoring her from a console, Eleanor made her boldest attempt yet. She pushed into his mind, visualizing herself as a trusted colleague. Release the specimen. Restraints for the scheduled pressure test, she suggested. Zentok paused, frowned, then tapped a sequence on his console. The suspension field deactivated, depositing Eleanor gently onto the chamber floor. As she stood dripping with blue fluid, Zentok's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, his mind completely convinced he was following protocol. Eleanor smiled for the first time since her abduction. She could feel the ship's database calling to her, a vast neural network of information waiting to be accessed. Now she would learn exactly what she was dealing with, and what these aliens truly feared. And more. Importantly, what had happened to Earth in her absence. Eleanor navigated the ship's corridors with false confidence, her borrowed Vexar lab coat concealing her human features from casual observation. The neural interface terminals that lined the walls called to her like beacons. Finding an isolated station, she pressed her palm against the gelatinous surface and gasped as information flooded her consciousness. The Confederation's darkest secrets unfurled before her, classified star charts, weapons schematics, and hidden histories, including footage from the Lurai extinction. Children with spiral markings on their foreheads, huddled in caves while orbital bombardments turned their world to glass. Eleanor's tears fell onto the terminal as she absorbed their final desperate broadcasts. We meant no harm. We only wanted to share our dreams. A security alert flashed across the ship's collective consciousness. Her empty containment chamber had been discovered. She had minutes, perhaps seconds. Earth. I need to find Earth, she thought desperately, plunging deeper into the data stream. The images that greeted her froze her blood. Confederation sterilization ships, 7 of them, already in position around her homeworld. Their weapons remained powered down, but official communications revealed the countdown. Earth would be evaluated for termination after Eleanor's dissection confirmed the presence of precursor genetic markers in the human population. The human specimen has escaped containment. The announcement reverberated through the ship. All personnel initiate lockdown protocols. Eleanor pulled back from the terminal, her newfound knowledge crystallizing into cold resolve. She needed to reach the hangar bay, but the approaching footsteps of the Krith execution squad left no time for subtlety. Commander Vexthar led the squad, his scaled face bearing ceremonial assassination scars, trophies from executing the last Lurai resistance leader. His thoughts projected so loudly she could hear them without trying. Another mind-bender to add to my collection. The Council will award me the Crimson Talon for this kill. Eleanor stepped into the open corridor, facing the 7 elite Krith warriors directly. Their particle disruptors hummed to life, targeting her heart. "You killed children," she said softly, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You hunted them like animals." Commander Vexthar laughed, a harsh clicking sound. "They were abominations, as are you." "Feel what they felt," Eleanor whispered. She didn't just suggest thoughts this time, she forced memories into their minds. Each Krith warrior suddenly saw his companions transform into towering confederation, soldiers attacking their own families. Their own earliest memories of fear, loss, and helplessness amplified 1,000-fold. The slaughter was brief but absolute. Disruptor fire crisscrossed the corridor as the elite squad tore itself apart in confused terror. Commander Vexthar was the last to fall, his weapon turned against himself as he tried to save what he perceived as his infant daughter from a monster wearing his own face. Eleanor walked through the carnage, numb to the horror she had unleashed. Her eyes now glowed with permanent golden light, a side effect of her rapidly evolving neural pathways. A ship-wide alert blared. "Warning, Mindbender contamination in Section 12. Emergency protocols initiated." Eleanor smiled grimly. Let them come. With each aggressive action against her, they only made her stronger, unlocking abilities she was only beginning to understand. The hangar bay beckoned ahead, and beyond it, Earth, still unaware of the extinction that awaited them unless she could reach them first and awaken what slept within them all. The Mantu Hive's central chamber pulsed with bioluminescent light, thousands of iridescent beings moving in perfect synchronization around Eleanor's suspended form. The regenerative chamber, a crystalline pod filled with amber fluid, healed her fractured leg and other injuries sustained during the crash landing. But physical healing was merely a side effect of what was truly happening. Eleanor's consciousness floated free of her body, carried on the psychic currents of the Mantu Hive mind. At first it had been overwhelming, millions of alien perspectives flooding her awareness simultaneously. But the Mantu had guided her, teaching her to maintain her individuality while connecting to their collective. Human Friend Awakener, they communicated through synchronized light pulses that somehow translated directly into concepts in her mind. Your kind once shared mind connection with us. Long cycles passed. The cave paintings she'd glimpsed earlier now made sense. Humans and Mantu, with connected thought patterns, creating something greater than either species alone. Through the vast, sensory network of the hive, Eleanor perceived the Confederation negotiators on the planet's surface. 6 representatives from different species, their thoughts guarded but still readable at this heightened state of awareness. They fear what they cannot control, the Mantu collective observed. They destroyed Forgot Buried, the connection gift. Eleanor focused her attention on the lead negotiator, a Talari diplomat whose species relied on chemical signals for emotional regulation. With delicate precision, she adjusted the diplomat's neurochemistry. Not enough to control, just enough to make cooperation seem more favorable than conflict. "We have come for the human specimen," the Talari announced to the Mantu representatives, facing him. "The Confederation Council guarantees fair treatment if she surrenders willingly." 10,000 Mantu simultaneously illuminated specific light patterns on their carapaces, creating a mesmerizing display that distracted the diplomats from subtle psychic suggestions entering their minds. She has agreed to cooperate, the diplomat suddenly declared, though Eleanor had communicated no such thing. We will return to our vessels and prepare for her transfer. As the delegation departed, Eleanor felt a surge of satisfaction ripple through the collective consciousness. The Mantu had amplified her abilities beyond what she could have achieved alone, allowing her to implant false coordinates that would lead the Confederation fleet into the heart of the shattered belt. A graveyard of derelict ships and unpredictable, gravitational eddies that would delay them for weeks. In her physical body, Eleanor's eyes opened, now permanently ringed with gold. The regenerative pod dissolved around her as she stepped onto the crystalline floor, her movements precise and confident. "Thank you," she said to the assembled Mantu, who pulsed with pleased blue light. "Not finished yet," they communicated. Show reveal unlock greater gifts." The Mantu parted, revealing a deeper chamber where an ancient artifact hummed with familiar energy. Precursor technology, a psychic amplifier that would allow her consciousness to reach across vast distances. "Earth," Eleanor whispered, placing her hands on the crystalline device. "I need to reach Earth." The amplifier activated at her touch, recognizing her genetic heritage. Her consciousness exploded outward through space, bypassing conventional distances to touch the minds of those with compatible neural patterns, other humans with dormant precursor genes. Halfway across the galaxy, in an Antarctic research station where it all began, Dr. Michael Chen suddenly collapsed at his desk, golden light briefly flashing behind his eyes as Eleanor made first contact. The awakening had begun. Eleanor drifted deeper into the ancestral memories stored within the Mantu genetic code. The images sharpened. Vast cities suspended in orbital rings, beings of translucent energy, directing the construction of massive psychic amplifiers among the stars. The precursors hadn't just been advanced. They had transcended physical form itself, becoming entities of pure consciousness who guided younger species toward similar evolution. One memory cut through with piercing clarity, a gathering of precursor elders, their energy forms flickering with concern as they discussed humanity's potential. "They develop too quickly," one elder communicated. "Their emotional intensity makes their psychic development unstable. But that same passion gives them unprecedented power," another countered. "They feel connections more deeply than any species we've encountered. They must be guided carefully. 1,000 generations of subtle development at minimum." Eleanor understood now. Humans had been on an accelerated evolutionary path, but one that required careful nurturing. Then came the rebellion. Species, who feared the precursor influence and modified their genetic code to resist mental connection. The Severing War played out in horrific detail. Planets reduced to ash, psychic shields that cut off entire star systems, and finally, the desperate measure. The precursors' decision to suppress the abilities of their protege species and scatter them across the galaxy, hoping that one day they might reawaken when the galaxy was ready. Humanity had been hidden in plain sight, their psychic heritage buried in junk DNA that the Confederation scientists had dismissed as evolutionary remnants. The irony struck Eleanor like a physical blow. The very radiation signatures of Confederation ships had inadvertently triggered the reactivation process the precursors had engineered millennia ago. Emerging from the memory trance, Eleanor found the Mantu pulsing with excited light patterns. "The circle pattern completes," they communicated. "The awakening time returns." "But why me?" Eleanor asked. "Why was I the first to awaken?" The Mantu's collective consciousness showed her a hidden memory. The Nepalese monastery she had visited. The monks there had been keepers of ancient meditation, techniques designed to maintain minimal activation of precursor genes, just enough to ensure they wouldn't atrophy completely over the generations. Her expedition, combined with the alien contact, had created the perfect conditions for full awakening. "I need to share this with Earth," Eleanor said. "Everyone needs to understand what's happening to them." The Mantu guided her back to the precursor amplifier. This time, instead of seeking individual minds, Eleanor crafted a complex psychic message containing the essential knowledge she had gained, compressed into dreamlike symbols that would resonate with human unconscious minds worldwide. As she released the message, she felt thousands of minds stirring in response. Scientists who would suddenly have breakthrough insights about human neural evolution, children who would wake with new awareness of the thoughts around them, ordinary people who would begin to sense connections they had never noticed before. In Antarctica, Michael Chen had already gathered the 73 researchers who collapsed during Eleanor's first contact attempt. Their eyes now held the same golden flecks as hers, and they worked feverishly to document their shared experience and the knowledge that had come with it. "We're not alone," Michael told the assembled group, his voice trembling with emotion. "And we're about to change everything." High above Earth, Confederation monitoring stations detected the exponential cascade of psychic activity beginning to spread across the planet. Exactly the scenario their ancient records had warned would precede the return of what they had feared for millennia. Admiral Kvex strode across the command bridge of the Krith dreadnought Severing Blade, his ceremonial armor gleaming under the tactical displays. 300 warships had answered the emergency summons, the largest fleet deployment since the last precursor purge. "Nova missiles armed and primed, Admiral," his weapons officer reported. "Targeting solutions locked on all major population centers." Kvex nodded grimly. He had personally overseen the Lurai extinction and received the Crimson Talon Medal from the Confederation Council. This operation would cement his legacy, the commander who prevented the return of the Mindbenders. "We strike decisively," he told his assembled officers. "No survivors, no negotiations. The human infection has spread too far already." The fleet emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, Earth's blue sphere filling their view screens. Preliminary. Scans confirmed their worst fears. Psychic activity had increased sevenfold in the 3 days since the escaped human specimen had made contact. "Deploying sterilization protocols in 3 minutes," the tactical officer announced. "All ships report ready." Kvex raised his scaled hand to give the final authorization when his weapons officer suddenly froze, his eyes flashing gold for just an instant. "Sir," the officer said, his voice oddly distant, "I'm detecting anomalies in the targeting systems. Earth appears to be moving." Kvex blinked in confusion. The planet remained fixed in the view screen, yet the targeting computers showed it, drifting randomly through different coordinates. "Override the system," he barked. Throughout the fleet, similar malfunctions cascaded through critical systems, communication channels filled with contradictory orders. Reactor cores registered phantom instabilities. Navigation computers plotted impossible courses. Vex felt cold dread as he recognized the pattern, exactly like the reports from the research vessel where the human specimen had escaped. He jabbed at the launch override, determined to fire at least one Nova missile before they lost control completely. His arms stopped mid-motion, muscles locked in rebellion against his mind's command. "What is happening?" he hissed through clenched teeth. The main view screen flickered and then her face appeared, the human female, her eyes now blazing with golden light, not just on his ship, but simultaneously across every vessel in the fleet. "You remember us now, don't you?" Her voice bypassed the communication system, speaking directly into their minds. "The ones you tried to erase?" Kvex fumbled for his neural dampeners, emergency drugs designed to block psychic influence. His fingers trembled as he pressed the injector against his neck, flooding his system with chemicals that clouded his thoughts but kept them his own. "Resist," he shouted to his crew, many of whom now stood motionless, their eyes unfocused. "This is mind manipulation." But across the fleet, the coordinated attack was already dissolving into chaos. Ships broke formation, some turning their weapons on each other as conflicted orders spread. Kvex watched in horror as his own flagship's navigation system activated independently, plotting a course away from Earth and back toward Confederation space. "Full shutdown," he ordered desperately. "Disable all automated systems." Too late. The hyperspace engines engaged, tearing the flagship from real space. The last thing Kvex saw before the blue sphere of Earth vanished was a golden web of energy connecting thousands of points across the planet's surface. Human minds linked in a defensive network more powerful than anything the Confederation had ever encountered. In his private quarters on the retreating flagship, Kavex collapsed into his meditation chamber, trying to clear the whispers from his mind. But even here, in his most protected space, he heard her voice, soft but unmistakable. "We're coming for the truth, all of it." The United Nations Security Council chamber hummed with tension so thick, Eleanor could feel it pressing against her skin. Half the delegates wore the sleek neural shields developed by Dr. Chen's team, elegant circlets that dampened external, psychic influence while still allowing their wearers to maintain their own awakened abilities. A compromise that had taken months of heated debate to achieve. "Dr. Hayes," the Secretary General began, "the Council recognizes your instrumental role in Earth's defense, but we must address the ethical implications of these new abilities." Eleanor stepped to the podium, aware of the billions watching this, broadcast worldwide. 3 months into humanity's awakening, society teetered on the brink of transformation, or collapse. "I don't come to you as a hero," she said, her voice steady. "I come as a cautionary tale." With carefully controlled precision, she projected a series of memories, not forcing them into unwilling minds but offering them to those receptive. The concentration camps where the Lurai children had been experimented upon. The precursor's abandonment of physical form, leading to their eventual disconnection from the material world. The temptation she herself had felt to simply override the will of others. Gasps and murmurs filled the chamber as delegates experienced fragments of her journey. "We stand at a crossroads," Eleanor continued. "We can become what the Confederation fears, beings who dominate others through mental force. Or, we can establish boundaries that honor both our new capabilities and the sanctity of individual consciousness." She outlined the ethical framework developed in collaboration with the Mantu, the principles of consensual consciousness, the prohibition against deep manipulation, and the requirement for collective oversight of psychic activities. Outside the UN building, thousands gathered. Religious leaders proclaimed divine gifts or demonic corruption. Scientists demanded structured study and regulation. Ordinary citizens carried signs ranging from "Evolve Together" to "Keep your mind out of mine." The debate continued for 16 hours straight, a record in UN history. When the Madison Square Garden Accords were finally drafted, they represented a new phase of human governance, one that acknowledged humanity's powerful abilities while establishing firmer ethical constraints than the precursors had ever managed. 2 days later, the Talari diplomatic vessel entered Earth orbit under a psychic neutral protocol, its crew's minds protected but not hostile. The landing in Madison Square Garden drew the largest global audience in history. Eleanor led 50 awakened humans in welcoming the 7 species who had accepted the invitation to negotiate. Each alien representative carried some form of mental protection, from the Talari's chemical neutralizers to the Vexar's sophisticated dampening fields. "We come seeking equilibrium," announced the Talari ambassador, his translucent skin pulsing with cautious hope. "The Confederation has fractured over how to respond to your awakening." In the historic ceremony that followed, Eleanor demonstrated humanity's commitment to responsible use of their abilities. She and the 50 representatives allowed the alien delegation to scan their neural patterns while maintaining their mental privacy, proving that humans could now control these abilities with precision rather than raw dominance. "We offer knowledge in exchange for peace," Eleanor told the assembled delegates as the treaty took shape. "All Confederation technological secrets in exchange for humanity's agreement to respect mental boundaries and accept oversight from a new mixed species council." As the ambassador signed the accord with a gesture of his 4-fingered hand, Eleanor sensed something unexpected in his carefully guarded thoughts. Not just fear or diplomatic calculation, but genuine relief, perhaps even hope. Behind the public ceremony, however, Eleanor remained vigilant. The militant Krith and 4 other species had severed all diplomatic ties, retreating behind vast neural dampening fields. Their absence from the negotiations spoke volumes about the challenges that still lay ahead. The Geneva Psychic Institute's crystalline architecture caught the morning sunlight, fracturing it into prismatic patterns across the central atrium. Eleanor moved through the meditation hall where advanced students practiced molecular manipulation, reconstructing matter through focused thought alone. Her own appearance had evolved subtly over the past 5 years. Her movements flowed with preternatural grace, and the golden flecks in her eyes had expanded into luminous rings that sometimes pulsed with her emotional state. "Distinguished progress, Dr. Ramirez," she noted to a young physicist who had just converted a carbon filament into a perfect diamond lattice through mental restructuring of molecular bonds. The institute had grown from a handful of awakened researchers to a global network of training facilities. Strict psychological screening ensured that only those with the ethical stability to handle advanced abilities were admitted to higher-level training. The catastrophic Beijing incident, where an unstable practitioner had temporarily controlled hundreds of minds before being neutralized, had taught humanity harsh lessons about the responsibilities that came with their gifts. Eleanor's attention shifted as her assistant approached with news from the Precursor's legacy mission. "They've cleared the former Confederation boundaries," the assistant reported. "Captain Chen requests your presence for the consciousness drive initialization." The experimental vessel represented humanity's first true leap beyond conventional physics. Unlike the repurposed Confederation technology that had carried humans to nearby star systems, this ship had been designed to harness collective consciousness for propulsion, rendering traditional hyperspace technology obsolete. 30 minutes later, Eleanor stood on the bridge of the Precursor's legacy, surrounded by the hybrid human Mantu crew. The Mantu ambassador, Iris in Twilight, pulsed a greeting of blue-violet light from her iridescent carapace. "The stars beyond known await us," the ambassador communicated. Over the years, the Mantu had developed more individualized consciousness, while maintaining their collective advantages, creating art and philosophy that blended both perspectives in ways humans found endlessly fascinating. Captain Michael Chen, his own eyes now ringed with gold, smiled at his former mentor. "The consciousness drive is ready. We've gathered the necessary mental energy from the volunteer network. Across Earth, thousands of trained psychics had contributed fragments of consciousness to power this historic journey." The ship's central chamber housed a modified precursor amplifier, similar to the one Eleanor had found among the Mantu, but enhanced with 5 years of human innovation. "Begin the sequence," Eleanor instructed, taking her position at the center of the circular bridge. As the crew joined minds in careful synchronization, Eleanor felt the familiar expansion of her consciousness. But this time, as the amplifier activated, something unexpected happened. Her awareness stretched farther than ever before, reaching toward the galactic core, and something reached back. Eleanor collapsed to the deck as a foreign presence touched her mind. The crew watched in awe as her projected consciousness manifested visibly, a golden form expanding beyond the ship's hull, reaching like tendrils toward a distant point in space. "They're waiting for us," she whispered, her physical voice overlaid with harmonic resonances. They never died. Throughout the bridge, monitors flashed with unprecedented energy readings. Across Confederation space, neural monitoring stations detected an impossible power surge as thousands of supposedly primitive species on isolated worlds simultaneously registered the first stirrings of psychic awakening. In the protected Krith territories, defensive systems faltered as their populations reported identical dreams, golden-eyed humans extending hands in greeting. Their worst fears confirmed, yet somehow transformed into something else, an invitation rather than a threat. On Earth, Eleanor's consciousness briefly touched every awakened human simultaneously, sharing a vision of galaxies reconnected, minds separated for millennia, finally rediscovering one another across the vast emptiness of space. The age of isolation was ending. The consciousness that had seeded the galaxy was calling its children home.